Get out of my face. Yuna's voice cut through the hallway sharply enough that the couple walking toward the elevator slowed without meaning to. Bridget didn't move. She stood at the door with the envelope in one hand, calm, composed, dressed too well for the assumptions already being thrown at her. She had knocked once. The door had opened and the woman standing in it had looked at her like she had already decided what kind of person she was. Did they send you up here? Yuna's eyes dropped to the envelope and lifted again with cold amusement. Deliveries go downstairs. There are signs. Big ones. Can you not read? The couple near the elevator stopped pretending not to listen. Bridget stared at Yuna for a long moment. Not embarrassed. Just unimpressed. Then she tilted her head slightly. Are you always this loud with strangers? She asked calmly, or am I getting a special performance? Yuna blinked once. Excuse me. Bridget lifted the envelope lightly between two fingers. I came up here trying to return mail that doesn't belong to me. You decided to build a whole personality around it. Yuna's expression hardened instantly. You need to watch how you speak to me. And you need to learn how to speak to people before your attitude gets mistaken for class. Bridget's voice stayed even. I did you a courtesy. Don't confuse that with weakness. Who exactly do you think you are? Bridget gave a small smile. The woman standing here realizing your parents failed you a little. Movement shifted inside the apartment. A man stepped out of the interior darkness toward the door. Tall, unhurried, sharp-eyed enough to take in the entire hallway in one sweep. Kim Seon-ho. He stopped just short of the doorway and smiled. Small, brief, like he hadn't expected the scene in front of him and was unexpectedly enjoying it. Yuna turned immediately. Seon-ho, Bridget flicked the envelope forward before she could finish. It struck Yuna lightly near the shoulder and dropped to the floor. Your mail, Bridget said. Then she looked directly at Seon-ho for the first time. You might want to teach your guests some manners. His mouth curved again despite himself. Bridget turned and walked back down the hallway without another word. Her steps were smooth, unhurried, like the interaction had never had the power to ruin her evening in the first place. Seon-ho watched her go, still faintly smiling. Then he looked at Yuna. The smile disappeared. If you've ever had someone mistake your silence for weakness, stay with me. Because Yuna thought she was humiliating a stranger until the man standing behind her started smiling. And if this is your first time here, subscribe and stay with me. You do not want to miss what happens next. Bridget Spears had woken up that morning with nothing more complicated on her mind than getting through a full day of work without her laptop crashing again. She was 28, sharp, and had built her life in this city the way she built everything carefully, without shortcuts, without asking anyone to hold the door open for her. Her apartment on the 14th floor wasn't the largest unit, but it was hers, and she had earned every square foot of it through 6 years of grinding through financial consulting work that most people her age hadn't even heard of yet. She was not the kind of woman who looked for trouble. She had stepped into the hallway that morning to grab a package and found the envelope sitting on her doormat instead. Just the envelope, slightly tilted against the base of her door like it had been slipped there and nudged into place. She picked it up without looking at the name on it, went back inside, set it on the kitchen counter, and opened it while reading work emails on her laptop because that was the kind of morning it was. She read the first 3 lines and her fingers stopped moving. She read them again. Then she turned the envelope over and looked at the name printed on the front and felt something cold move through her chest. The letter was not hers, and what was written inside it was not something she was supposed to have read. She stood in her kitchen for a long moment, very still, running through what she knew about the name on that envelope. Kim Seon-ho. She had heard it once, maybe twice, from neighbors in passing, connected loosely to the apartment at the far end of the floor, the one whose lights were almost always off, the one that always smelled faintly of cedar when she walked past it on her way to the stairs. She had seen a man going into it 3 times in the months since she'd moved here. Once in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon with 2 men beside him who did not have the body language of colleagues. Once alone at close to midnight. She had never spoken to him. She had never needed to. It was none of her business. She pressed the envelope closed as carefully as she could. Picked it up. walked down the hallway, knocked, and the door had opened. Inside the apartment after Bridget left, Sian-ho picked the envelope up from the floor and turned it over in his hands. It had been opened and resealed, carefully, but not carefully enough. He looked at Yuna, who was already moving back into the living room, already reaching for her wine glass, already done with the hallway moment the way she was done with most things that didn't directly concern her. "Delivery girl," she said, without looking back at him. "They're getting bolder." He didn't answer. Sian-ho was 31 years old, and he had been running the operational side of the Kim family for 5 years, which meant he had spent 5 years making decisions that other people were afraid to make and living in the specific loneliness of a position that most people confused with power. The apartment on the 14th floor was where he went when he needed to be out of reach, no staff, no schedules, no expectation. A place to think without being observed. Yuna was there because Yuna was always somewhere nearby. She had an instinct for being present that he had once mistaken for affection and had long since recognized as strategy. Their families had been arranging this match for 4 years. His parents loved her. His mother had once told him, in complete seriousness, that Yuna was exactly the kind of woman the Kim family needed standing beside it. He had nodded and said nothing because there was nothing to say that wouldn't start a conversation he didn't have the energy to finish that day. He had been planning to end it. He had been planning to end it for 8 months. He kept finding reasons to wait for a better moment, and the better moment kept not arriving. He sat down and opened the envelope fully. The letter was handwritten. 1 page. The handwriting was controlled, almost pleasant, which made the content worse somehow. It said that the writer had eyes on Chairman Kim. It said that Sian-ho had been watched for longer than he knew. It said that if he was not responsive to what would be asked of him, his father would be the one to pay the cost. No names signed at the bottom. Postmarked from inside the city. Someone close. Someone with access. He read it twice. Set it on the table. Sat with it. He thought about the woman in the hallway. She had opened this. She had read whatever was inside, and she had walked down the hall and tried to return it. She hadn't gone to building security. She hadn't taken photographs of it. She had come to give it back, and Yuna hadn't even let her say a single word. He picked up his phone and began making calls. Quietly. Carefully. The way he always did things that mattered. 1 week passed. His men had been watching. His contacts had been listening. The letter sat in a drawer in the 14th floor apartment, and Sian-ho carried the weight of it through 7 days of normal operations, board meetings, family dinners, Yuna appearing at events beside him in dresses that photographed well. 7 days of nothing cracking open far enough for him to see through. On the 8th day, he was at his primary residence getting ready to drive to his parents' home for dinner when his phone rang. His mother's number. He answered immediately. Her voice was wrong. "Your father went out this afternoon," she said. "He said he wanted some air. He told the security not to come. He insisted, Sian-ho. You know how he gets." I couldn't. Her breath broke. "He hasn't come back. It's been 4 hours." Sian-ho was already moving. He was still on the call with his mother when the second call hit his phone. Unknown number. He switched over. The voice on the other end was calm in the specific way of people who have rehearsed their calm. They told him the chairman was safe for now. They told him he had 48 hours to receive their terms and indicate his cooperation. They told him that the letter had been a courtesy and that his response to it had been noted as insufficient. Then they hung up. The room was very quiet. He made 3 calls and his entire network moved. Every man he trusted was activated within the hour. Every contact in every corner of the city got a message. He drove to his parents' house and walked his mother through every detail of the afternoon, every moment before his father had left, everything the security lead had seen. She was holding herself together by something very thin. He sat with her for 2 hours before he trusted her not to fall apart the moment he left. Yuna arrived while he was still there. She came through the door with food she had prepared and went straight to his mother and held her. His mother leaned into her. He watched this from across the room and felt something he couldn't name clearly sit heavily in his stomach. Yuna stayed through most of the night. She sat beside Seonho's mother on the living room sofa with one arm around her shoulders while calls moved in and out of the house in waves. At some point after midnight, Seonho came downstairs from another meeting with his men and found his mother half asleep against Yuna's shoulder. "We'll find him," Yuna said quietly when she saw him looking. His mother reached for Yuna's hand immediately, gripping it hard like it was the only stable thing in the room. "I don't know what we would do without you," she whispered. Yuna held her hand tighter. "You won't have to find out." He left them there and went back to his men. That same night, across the city, Bridget was driving home from the office later than she'd meant to. She took the long route because there had been traffic on her usual road, and she knew a side street that added 4 minutes but subtracted 20. Her headlights swung around a corner and found a figure slumped against a low wall to the left of the pavement. She drove 2 more car lengths before she stopped. She sat in the car for a moment. Then she turned off the engine and got out. The old man was somewhere in his mid to late 60s, silver-haired, broad-shouldered in the way of men who were once physically formidable and still carry the shape of it. His clothing was good, not flashy, but the kind of quality that doesn't announce itself. There was a wound at his left temple, dried and dark. His collar was stained. He was breathing, she established that first, and his pulse when she found it was weak but steady. She had trained as a nurse for 2 years before the pull of financial work had taken her in a different direction. Her hands had not forgotten. The pavement around him held the faint evidence of foot traffic that had gone around him instead of stopping. She absorbed this without comment. She got him into the back seat of her car slowly and carefully and drove to her apartment because his color concerned her, and she wanted to see the wound properly before deciding whether the hospital or stabilization came first. She cleaned the wound under good light in her bathroom. It was a strike rather than a fall. The pattern of it was specific. She wrapped it, checked his responses, brought him water and then tea and sat across from him in her living room while he drifted between sleep and partial consciousness. When he was coherent enough, she asked him gently who he was, if he had family she could contact. He looked at her with eyes that were warm even through the disorientation. He gave her fragments. A name that she didn't catch clearly. A sense of something large around him. She didn't push. She set him up in her spare room, checked on him twice in the night, and eventually slept. In the morning, she made coffee for both of them. He sat at her kitchen table and smiled at her across it like she reminded him of something he hadn't thought about in a long time. She drove him to the hospital, walked in beside him, explained everything clearly to the attending staff, paid for his intake without being asked, left her number, and asked them to help locate his family. Then she drove to work. The call came through to Seonho's phone at 11 the next morning. A hospital. A staff member speaking carefully. An elderly male patient had been brought in the previous morning by a young woman. One of the nursing staff had recognized the chairman from a photograph on her phone, a family event from several years ago that had made the local news briefly. They wanted to be certain before they made the call. Seonho was in the hospital within 20 minutes. His father was sitting up against his pillows when Seonho pushed the door open, bandaged at the temple, tired in the specific deep way that follows real fear. But his eyes were clear and he lifted his chin when he saw his son and did not look away. Seonho froze the moment he saw him, then crossed the room in 2 steps and dropped beside the bed. He didn't say anything for 10 seconds, then his voice broke just slightly before he could steady it. "Appa," he swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." His hand tightened around his father's arm. "Whoever did this," a pause. His eyes hardened again. "I'll find them. I promise you, they will pay." Then he continued. "Who brought you here?" Seonho finally asked. "A young woman," his father said. "She found me on the street. She took me to her home first, dressed the wound herself." He paused. "She has very kind hands." "What did she look like?" His father described her. Seonho went still. He stayed at the hospital through the afternoon and into the evening, fielding calls from his men, updating his mother, sitting for long stretches in the chair beside his father's bed without speaking. His father slept. Seonho did not. He was standing at the window when he heard the door. Bridget came in the way she'd come down the hallway with the envelope, purposeful, quiet, not announcing herself. She had driven straight from the office. She told herself she only wanted to confirm that someone had come for him, that he wasn't in that room alone. She pushed the door open and the old man saw her first. His face did something immediate and warm, and he raised one hand toward her in a slow, deliberate wave. Then she saw the man at the window turning toward her. Everything in the room became very still. Seon-ho looked at her. She looked at him. The air between them held a complicated history for a moment. The hallway, the envelope on the floor, the woman who hadn't let her speak a word. "You," he said. Then, quieter, the letter. "My neighbor." Her eyes moved past him to the old man. "How is he?" "Stable." She looked at the man in the bed. "Is he yours?" "My father." The chairman waved again, small and satisfied, like a man who had just watched something click into place. They stepped into the hallway together. Seon-ho turned to face her, and when he spoke he was direct in the way of someone who has decided not to waste her time. He thanked her for his father. He thanked her for the letter. And then he said that what happened at his door was not acceptable and he was sorry for it. She received the apology without rushing to make him feel better about it, because it hadn't been fine. He noticed that she didn't. "Why did you stop?" he asked. "You didn't know who he was." "Because no one else did," she said. He looked at her for a moment. "Let me repay you." "You don't have to." "Coffee then." "At least let me buy you coffee." She considered him. "I'll think about it." She thought about it for one elevator ride the following morning. The doors opened at the 14th floor, and he was already inside. She stepped in. He looked at her and waited. "Okay," she said. "Coffee." That evening they sat across from each other in a place that was quiet enough to talk and public enough to be honest. The conversation was careful at first, two people who had only ever met in high-pressure moments trying to locate each other's ordinary. Then it loosened. He asked why she'd never knocked on his door before, given they shared a floor. She said she barely saw him there. He said he genuinely hadn't known they were neighbors. He'd never registered anyone else on that end of the hallway. She told him she'd seen him 3 times. Twice with men who weren't friends. Once at midnight alone. She said she'd figured he was someone the city had weight attached to. He told her his full name. His complete name. She went quiet. Not performing surprise. Just placing it. "Then your father is the chairman." "The Kim family." "Yes." She sat with this information and stayed exactly who she had been 30 seconds before he said it. She didn't lean forward. She didn't recalibrate. He found this more interesting than almost anything else she could have done. The evenings multiplied. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became a walk that lasted until neither of them could pretend they were heading home. She told him about the 2 nursing years she never talked about and how she'd pivoted and why. He told her about the apartment on the 14th floor and what it meant to him to have a place that required nothing of him. They were careful with each other in the early days, the way careful people always are, but there was something underneath the care that was moving toward something else. One evening, she set her glass down and looked at him directly. "The woman at your door," she said. "Who is she to you?" He didn't look away. "An arrangement. Both our families have been building toward it for years. My parents believe in her." A pause. "I have never wanted it. I've been trying to find the moment to end it." "Have you found it?" "Yes." She nodded once. She didn't ask him to prove it. He appreciated that more than she knew. Yuna found out on a Thursday. She had her ways of tracking the shape of Seon-ho's days, and when the shape changed, she paid attention. She found out there was a woman. She found out it was someone from the building. She did not go to Seon-ho. She went to Bridget. She found her in the building lobby on a Friday evening, arriving home from work, and she was composed when she walked over. She told Bridget, in a voice designed to sound almost kind, that what she was doing was naive. That Seon-ho existed inside a family structure that didn't accommodate this kind of thing. That arrangements like theirs weren't simply walked away from, and Bridget would embarrass herself by believing otherwise. She said all of this with the patience of someone explaining something to a person who didn't understand how the world worked. Bridget let her finish. Then she said, "That sounds like a conversation you need to have with him." She walked to the elevator, pressed the button. The doors opened and she stepped inside, and the doors closed and Yuna was left standing in the lobby with nothing in her hands to push against. She went to Seon-ho the next day. This time the composure had a crack running through it. She spoke about the arrangement, the families, the years invested, the commitment implied. She performed with real technical skill. He sat and listened to all of it. Then he said, "It's over, Yuna. Seon-ho. I have managed this longer than I should have. I'm not going to keep doing it." His voice was even. Not cruel. Absolute. "Don't go near Bridget again." She left. And something inside her moved past the point where reasonable people stop. What Seon-ho's investigators had been building for weeks was nearly complete. The trail from the letter had always been specific. Whoever sent it knew things that didn't circulate publicly. His father's habit of occasional solitary walks. The particular afternoon on which the security lead would be occupied with a separate assignment. The route the chairman preferred when he went alone. These were interior details. Family details. The kind that moved through a household in private. The evidence, when it was complete, was devastating in its precision. 6 months earlier, Yuna's father's company had begun quietly collapsing under debt exposure that the public did not yet know about. A rival corporate faction circling the Kim family had approached her through an intermediary she trusted, a man she had known since university, someone positioned close enough to the takeover operation to make promises sound believable. They told her the Kim family would survive pressure. They told her no one intended real harm. They only needed leverage, access, timing, internal routines. Yuna had given them all three. At first it had been information small enough to justify to herself. Schedules. Preferences. Small internal habits that felt harmless in isolation. But the line had already been crossed before she admitted it. By the time she understood how far the operation was going, she was already inside it. And somewhere beneath all of it was another truth she would never say aloud. Part of her had wanted Seon-ho cornered by crisis. Wanted him frightened enough to lean fully on the life that had already been arranged for him. On her. She had mistaken proximity for control. She had mistaken Seon-ho for a man who could be manipulated through fear. He went to his parents' home that evening and told them himself. He put the evidence in front of them and walked them through it. His mother's face went very still. His father closed his eyes and kept them closed for a long moment. They had trusted her in their home. His mother had leaned on her during the search, had held her hand, had accepted comfort from the person who had helped make the comfort necessary. The silence in that room after Seon-ho finished speaking held everything that didn't need to be said. Yuna was arrested 2 days later. The families were notified. Seon-ho made sure the right information was in the right hands, and then he did not speak her name again. It was his mother who called Bridget. Not at Seon-ho's suggestion. She did it herself. 1 week later, and she called in the morning when she knew Bridget would be getting ready for work. She said she had heard about her son and the coffee and the evenings that had multiplied. She said she would like her to come to dinner. She said it the way mothers say things they mean without apology. Bridget stood in her kitchen after the call and looked at the counter where she had opened the wrong envelope 7 weeks ago. She thought about the way the hallway had felt that night, the words that had hit the air and stayed there, the envelope she had set on the floor and walked away from. She thought about the old man at her kitchen table smiling at her across his coffee cup like she reminded him of something good. She said yes. The house was everything she hadn't let herself expect. It was large, but it wasn't cold. There were voices from 3 rooms at once when she arrived, something cooking that smelled like a Sunday, the particular warm chaos of a family that was used to being together. Seon-ho was in the entrance when she came through the door, and he looked at her the way he'd been looking at her for weeks now, like she was something he'd made a decision about and wasn't revisiting. His mother appeared before the door had fully closed and embraced her without preamble, the full embrace of a woman who had decided something and wasn't performing it. His siblings came through from the other rooms, and there were introductions that overlapped and questions that started before the previous ones were answered and laughter at something she didn't fully catch, and she realized halfway through the first 10 minutes that she had stopped bracing herself. His father came in last. He moved carefully still. His body remembered what had happened, would remember it for some time, but he was fully himself. He came across the room to where Bridget was standing, and he took both her hands in his and held them. He looked at her the way he'd looked at her across her kitchen table, across the hospital bed, with the particular attention of someone who has seen a person at their truest and knows it. "I know a person's character," he said, "by how they behave when no one is watching. You didn't know who I was. You didn't know what that night would give you or cost you. You just stopped." He held her hands a moment longer. "My son chose right." She felt something move through her chest that she didn't have an immediate name for. She blinked, kept her face as composed as she could manage, which was not very composed. Sian-ho came up beside her. He didn't say anything. He reached down and took her hand and held it, easy and certain, like it was something he'd been doing for years. She looked at him sideways. He was already looking at her. His mother called everyone to the table. His siblings moved toward the dining room in a wave of noise. His father patted her hand once before releasing it and turned to follow them. The house was full of the sound of people who belonged to each other, chairs pulling out, dishes being set down, someone arguing cheerfully about something that didn't matter at all. Sian-ho didn't move yet. He stood beside her in the entrance of the dining room with her hand in his and looked at her. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She looked at him. At this man who had read a warning in an envelope and carried it alone. Who had watched her walk away from his door and thought about it afterward. Who had sat by his father's hospital bed in the evening dark and waited for a door to open. "Yeah," she said. "I'm okay." He brought her hand up briefly, pressed his mouth to her knuckles. Simple and quiet, with no audience for it. Then he led her to the table. If this story appealed to you, subscribe and stay with me. What did you think of Bridget's reaction in that hallway? Did she go too far, or did Yuna deserve every word? Drop your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next one.